We are preparing to remove the transmission and replace the clutch pressure plate and throwout bearing on the 1991 Honda Beat. Starting to get the suspension loose so we can pull that half shaft out and also replace that boot. All right, here is the driver's side. This is for the Honda Beat, by the way. Driver's side CV axle. Got a boot that's bad, of course. We'll replace that and probably just clean this up, repack it with grease. You can see on the end, on the Beat, it has that expansion ring to hold it in place. I've seen lots of other folks on YouTube who had a hell of a time getting their CD axles out. Mine were actually quite easy. I just put a screwdriver about here relative to the transmission and gave it a couple of twists, and they came out fairly easy. But that's the end of the axle shaft that goes into the transmission. And this is at the hub. Taking some measurements so that I will know which size boot I need to find. The big end is 2.75. Well, I have the rear cross member out and the transmission completely bolted, and I'll have the transmission out shortly. I'm going to go ahead and rust coat the entire cross member. There's not much rust, but there's some. I'm going to go ahead and recoat this while it's out, and I like this stuff. Okay, this is on the 1991 Honda Beat. The transmission is out, and if you need to do this to your car, be aware that there are a lot of fasteners, probably 3 dozen, and my memory's not great, so I'm labeling these jokers. Super tiny, dinky little transmission. I don't know, 50 pounds, 45, something like that. I'll put some plastic in those axle ports and get it cleaned up here shortly. And also, you can see, I can see a pretty good amount of wear on the pressure plate fingers. What I don't see is any grease on the inside of the bell housing, which is a good thing. I think that grease inside the bell housing indicates a leaking rear main seal, and we don't have that. So here is the Honda Beat with the rear cross member removed, the exhaust, suspension, and transmission. This is going to be my clutch friction disc install pilot tool. Oddly enough, I found sockets that were just the right size for the inside splines of the friction disc, the inside opening on the flywheel, and that is almost exactly the same size as this. It was about 2 millimeters too skinny, so I've added a couple of layers of tape, and this is going to be my clutch pilot tool. And there it is. That will be my pilot tool for installing the new clutch friction disc. And the reason I believe this is going to work is because the clutch was functioning fine, well, with exceptions. The clutch alignment was fine, and I have not loosened or touched the pressure plate. So this alignment is correct as it is, and this fits well into the setup that was working. The reason I'm changing the clutch is twofold. One, the clutch returned. The clutch pedal just would not return. I flushed it, I bled it, I replaced the master cylinder, and the bottom line is that you can see there's wear on these fingers, and they aren't as lifted as they should be. So that's part of it. And the other part is that I could hear a little bit of sound coming from the clutch when I would put my foot on and then take it off of the clutch, which made me think the throwout bearing was bad. and I didn't want to wait until it exploded and maybe took out the transmission, so I'm doing all of it. Okay, the Honda Beat driver's side axle, CV axle shaft is repacked with grease, and I'm going to slide that boot into position and lock it down. I thought I would check out the engine mounts and transmission mounts while I'm in here. Looks like that one doesn't have any splits that I can see. Those bushings seem pretty good. Same there. Nope. Okay. A quick look at the new components that are going to go in, so you can see the part numbers. I hope these are right. We'll find out. Before I take the pressure plate and clutch disc out, I wanted to kind of document the play that's in there. Hopefully I can see the springs and everything on this video. I'm not sure that I can, but hopefully. I want to get some footage of how the throwout bearing is articulated and set up before I take things apart. All right, well, there's the new clutch plate. There is the old one. A side-by-side comparison. There's actually a tremendous amount of friction material left. The pressure plate scalded pretty good. And I'm wondering how much spring pressure there actually is. But, yeah. That disc has got a lot of life left in it, I think. At least a fair amount. Alright, here is the old throwout bearing assembly. It has this retaining clip that loops the shaft and makes a pivot point for the throwout bearing to connect to. And of course, this is the new one that's going in. I don't really see or hear, or feel rather, much of an issue with that throwout bearing, but I do think I could hear it. I also want to document the input shaft play on the transmission. There's a little bit. I need to see if that's normal. Here is our new clutch disc. Tiny as you might imagine. Our new throwout bearing. The contact surface on this is fairly narrow. It's that inner ring is the contact surface. And our new pressure plate. I want to get a little footage up close, if possible, of the flywheel. I may need to start this video again. I haven't cleaned this yet, but I wanted to get some close-up footage of the flywheel. Looks like it's in decent shape. I don't see any cracks. Honda Beat fasteners just before the reinstall begins. All right, this is fun. You have to look closely at those bolts, but you're going to see, these are the pressure plate bolts. You're going to see, if you look closely, some places where they are indented and dimpled. So I don't know if this is unique to my situation or yours is going to be the same, but these are single-use bolts. They are designed to snap when you try to torque them back down, and I found out, and of course it's easy for me to see, maybe not so much of the camera, but they're dimpled, so these are going to have to be replaced. All right, fortunately I had the right size speed out. This is a Black & Decker speed out to get the stud back out of the hole where the bolt yielded. And I'm super glad I had this tool in my toolbox. You use the smaller end. It's counter rotating, so counterclockwise, to drill the center of the broken off bolt out. And then this end, of course, runs into that hole counterclockwise and works it back out. If you don't have these tools, man, God, I would lose probably a day if I didn't have that in my toolbox. Okay, the clutch assembly is installed on the Honda Beat, and I did have to replace those bolts, but everything's torqued in place. Next, I'll try to fit the transmission back in place. All right, the new clutch, pressure plate, and throwout bearing are in, and I am refilling the transmission with oil so I can take her for a test drive. Fingers crossed. All right, a quick test drive of the Honda Beat after the clutch replacement. Yeah, seems like it's doing pretty well. Love that sound.